Well, thank you for the question. Australia's voice is in it to win it. We're here to challenge the status quo and give voters who feel abandoned by the major parties an alternative that they can trust, an alternative that is based on independent, principled representation. We're contesting key Senate seats, and we've made announcements in Victoria as our lead candidate, Mohammed Al-Masri, hits the ground running. And we've also got Megan Cracker in WA. And inshallah, we'll have the other announcements follow through. But the goal isn't to just be on the ballot, it's to build a movement that lasts long and that ensures people continue having, or reinstate that faith that people seem to have lost because of the two major party duopoly, prioritizing their interests and corporate interests over what people and everyday Australians have been calling for. So with Australia's voice only being registered about 8 weeks ago, we're fairly young. But in saying that, we really think that there's an opportunity for us to hold the balance of power in the Senate. There's many movements on the ground within House of Representative seats that are taking place, whether it's independents that are endorsed by community members or within that electorate, or whether there is a broader movement behind them, whether it's Climate 200 and the Teals campaigns, or whether it's through Muslim Vote Matters or TMV. So we know that a lot's happening on the ground in lower house, but people often forget that the Senate exists and it plays such a crucial role when it comes to being able to pass legislation in both houses. So yes, there is a large chunk of the introduction and debate that takes place in the lower house, but if the bill doesn't pass the Senate, it doesn't make it. It doesn't make it through. So that's what Australia's voice hopes to achieve: to hold the balance of power in the Senate, become a stronger crossbench where we can hold the government to account. We can ensure that it's prioritizing the needs and concerns of everyday Australians on the ground, rather than just ramming through and making, dirty deals with the coalition to just benefit themselves. The prime example for that was the recent electoral reform bills, where one of the many measures is defeated MPs get a payout of $120,000 plus 3 free return flights to Canberra. Name me another job where you get paid when you're fired. It's a rort that needs to be highlighted and reminded that these major parties are only in it for themselves. And they've lost touch with everyday Australians. So nationally, senators have 6-year terms, and I may not be up for re-election this time around, but it's important for us to give that strong alternative for everyday Australians to vote for. With our subsequent plans, I know that this is just the beginning. We're not a one election experiment. We're building something that's long-term, this movement that is gaining traction. We're seeing this incredible growth to our base, and we're hoping to keep increasing it, strengthening our community connections, and making sure that we're ready to contest even more seats next time. And Australia's voice is, more than, our makeup and DNA isn't just about winning elections. We're more than that. It's about shifting, political culture, the discourse, the debates that go on, and ensuring that you know, people feel that sense of empowerment, that the power lies with your average Australian who is doing it tough and struggling, and may not be across the political discourse as much, for them to realize that at the end of the day, it's them that politicians are working for, not the other way around. And we need to change the way leadership is done from a top down to a bottom up approach, where we make sure that people on the ground can feed information and make sure their concerns are directly sent to those policymakers and politicians who actually get to make their decision and make the decisions that will impact communities right across Australia. We're definitely exploring it. The issues we care about, like cost of living, housing, education, workers' rights, they're not unique, and they don't just stop to a federal level. If we see the opportunity to make a real difference at a state and territory level, then we'll take it. So let's just say it wasn't warm and friendly. I think from the moment I took a stand, I was isolated, I was iced out. Some of my colleagues wouldn't even look me in the eye. And I think the message was very clear that obedience is valued over principles. Caucus solidarity is more important than the concerns of your constituents. That if you want to succeed and political expediency and longevity is valued more than your conscience. And it was a clear reminder for me that I didn't enter politics to be a rubber stamp or to be in photo opportunities and just look pretty. I'm here to represent my constituents and my conscience. And the fact that the Labor Party assumed that I would just comply because it's my first term, or that, I had some colleagues even come up to me and tell me, oh, think about it. In the next term of government, you could potentially have like an assistant minister role or a position that you could make, important changes. And I was like, but I'm not here to become a minister. I'm here to take a stand. And what's happening, especially on the vote of the recognition of a Palestinian state, like that was the line in the sand that I had to draw and say, there are many things we can agree to disagree, but this is something that I heavily campaigned on, but also that I recruited members within the state and national level when we had conferences, when we debated on it, when we were agreeing what the wording of those resolutions and motions were going to be put in our party platform, to then be rendered useless or not even be taken into consideration. It honestly felt like a massive disappointment. And I think many Australians out there are not just disillusioned, but they're disappointed, because after 9 years of a coalition government, the Labor government and Anthony Albanese as a person contesting to become prime minister, he gave everyone hope. And people looked up and said, you know what, this could be that opportunity where things shift for us as Australians, on both a national and an international scale. But to have the Labor government elected and put into power, but then to see the complicity, the silence, the deafening hypocrisy that we were constantly seeing, the double standards, I think people were just very disheartened and disappointed that they expected better. And the Labour Party, and of course, I mean, nobody expects anything more from Dutton and the coalition, but people expected more, and Labour just, you know, let just made everyone feel like their hopes and dreams tied to the Labour Party was just a waste. So yeah, and they felt let down, and rightfully so. I would have certain MPs and senators, you know, who would privately either say that, look, that they either agreed with my position, but they just couldn't come out and say it, or they would show pseudo empathy and just, you know, people who I've never spoken to would just randomly message me and just, you know, you could tell that the messages weren't genuine. And then there were also those who would say, oh, I'm checking in on your mental health, but I'm just letting you know that I don't support your stance. And the fact that they had to clarify that just made me wonder, like, why are you even trying to clarify or make that distinction? Like, hey, I'm not here because I support your stance. I'm just checking in on your mental health. So it felt, again, very isolating when, you know, push came to shove. It seemed like most of the caucus, in fact, all of them, were just too afraid to risk their careers, and they didn't want to come out and say anything publicly without the checks and the ticks of approval from the leadership. And that tells you everything you need to know about the culture in major parties. There really isn't any level of agency or autonomy or truly being a voice for your communities. It's putting party politics above all. And when you have to compromise your own values, then what's the whole point of you trying to be a leader and a representative when you can't even speak your mind or speak your truth? So I guess before I left, there was this keen effort to manage me, to keep me in line, to make sure that I didn't become too independent in expressing my opinions. I think once I crossed the floor, obviously that dynamic desperately and dramatically just changed. It was clear that I was now seen as an inconvenience. I and therefore I was in, you know, banished to indefinite purgatory until I made up a decision of either staying within the tent and towing the line or giving up my seat back to Labor. I chose the third option, which was to leave the Labor Party and obviously go off on my own. Currently in Senate negotiations, it's been since July 2024 that I've been requesting for the additional staff that every senator is entitled to, but that's at the discretion of the Prime Minister. So because the Prime Minister doesn't deem me worthy, or he's playing these petty politics games, he hasn't given me my staff, which means that I am constantly under the pump. The number of legislations that come through my desk during every sitting week, and it's just me and two other staffers, and we need to get across stakeholder engagement, chatting with different industry groups, having meetings with various other stakeholders and community groups and advocacy groups to understand where people's positions are after we've, you know, gone through hundreds of pages of legislation. And sometimes we don't even get enough time and notice to actually go through the list of amendments that are often presented and then make a decision of how I'm going to vote and to put and justify my case forward. the government have not engaged with me in negotiations before the last day of the November sitting, and that's because when the Pauline Hanson stunt took place, where Pauline Hanson was questioning my legitimacy as an Australian senator representing WA because of Section 44. Senator Lydia Thorpe spoke out and protested, and so she ripped a piece of paper, threw it at Pauline, and therefore was suspended. Because she was suspended on that last day of Parliament, the government needed my vote to push a 40 bills guillotine motion, which meant that those 40 bills would be put to a vote without debate, without any discussions. And so that's the only time the government had actually, well, the Prime Minister himself asked me to come into his office. I mean, I've maintained a very professional, adult way of dealing with the whole situation, but there seems to be a lot of pettiness from the other side. And yeah, the government didn't agree to my deal of getting rid of the 3 immigration amendment bills that were absolutely horrendous and barbaric and just draconian, deporting genuine refugees to a third country where their, human rights and freedoms would not be respected or upheld. So it was just one of those things where I was like, again, the Labor Party is straying away from its own party platform. They are no longer listening to their rank and file members and their union members and all their supporters out there. So the government didn't take the deal, and I said, okay, well then no deal from me. Like, I'm not going to let the government just, have things their way without proper negotiations. And yeah, it was a patronizing conversation where the PM didn't even look at me. So again, this is we need to put petty games aside. Australians don't have time for that. As politicians and representatives, we don't have time for that. We need to move on with the job. We need to have immediate relief when it comes to the rising cost of living pressures, housing affordability, to ensure that Australia adopts a more independent foreign policy. We can't just keep turning a blind eye and playing these games, because Australians are frankly they're seeing right through it and they're sick and tired of it. So to those constituents, my message to them is vote with your conscience. Don't just settle for politicians who remember you when, elections around the corner, but then disappear when it's time to take a stand, when you demand solid action from them. And speaking of action, don't just listen to their empty words. Look at their voting records. Look at how they acted and what actions they took when it mattered most. And I think having independents running in lower house and obviously in the Senate, there's Australia's voice. Constituents can no longer say that, we were forced to choose between the lesser of two evils. You have the options, you have the opportunity, you have the power, utilize it, because if those same MPs, whether they're Labor or whatever, if they have not listened to you, if they haven't fought for you, and if you haven't seen any level of commitment or action from them, then you know that they won't fight for you after the election. And it's all the, don't be fooled by the amount of money that gets splashed around the community. Don't feel obliged because they're coming out with checkbooks that you must now, only vote for them. Because there's this perception within the major parties, in particular within the Labor Party, that the Muslim or Arab constituency or the multicultural constituency, they forgive and forget. So that's what they tell themselves to justify the lack of action that they were taking during the genocide that was live streamed on our phones. Like, I want people to understand that if your member of parliament did not take action when it mattered most, what guarantee do you have that they will take action after they've been re-elected? And so I straight up tell people that you can not complain about not having options anymore. You can't turn a blind eye and say, well, I didn't know, because it's all out there. It's just about whether people have the appetite and the courage to vote with their conscience for once in their life. Yes, absolutely. Once a unionist, always a unionist. I still stand firmly with workers and the union movement. Some union leaders in WA have been quite supportive because they understand that my commitment to fighting for workers' rights hasn't changed. There are others, particularly those who have very close ties with the Labor Party, have kept their distance. But, it's important to highlight that unionism isn't about party loyalty or party affiliation. Unionism has always been and always will be about fighting for fairer wages, fighting for safer workplaces, for job security, to ensure that people understand their rights and are able to have the tools and are equipped to be able to take on that fight. And that's exactly what I continue to do. Like, perhaps while I was in the Labor Party, I was very confined within the factionalism of different unions, thinking, you only deal with the factions that you fall within. So I was in the left faction, and it was like, you don't think about the factions or the unions who represent the right faction. And it's like, right now, there is nothing to do with, party politics and factionalism. For me, a worker is a worker and their rights need to be protected. I'm so humbled, and honestly, everyone's been so welcoming every time I travel to the eastern states, and as so much love and respect to everyone out there on the East Coast. My home is WA, and that's where my fight is. People, yes, in various conversations have raised the idea of moving to the East. But I remind myself that, my commitment is to the people who elected me. And I'll always be here for WA. And I know that Australia's voice is a national movement. And, inshallah, we may get people elected in Victoria or New South Wales, Queensland, wherever. It's really important for me to ensure that the movement is national. My commitment, of course, is to WA, being a West Australian senator. And I don't know if I could trade the beach sunsets moving over to the east, but
we have some good sunrises.
I know, I've heard the sunrises are spectacular, but I'm more of a sunset gal, so no, jazakallah khair. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.